Can you believe it? Seriously, can you actually wrap your head around the fact that he just left? I'm sitting here on the hardwood floor of what used to be our apartment, my back pressed against the cold plaster wall. The whole place smells like cardboard and finality. It's surrounded by the ghosts of his life, the faint outline on the wall where his bookshelf stood for 5 years, the scuff marks from his desk chair, the deafening echo that bounces off the now bare walls. He's gone. Tristan, my brother, my rock, the one person in this entire godforsaken world I thought would never, ever walk away, just packed up his meticulously organized life and left me here in the wreckage. He's the betrayer here, not me. I need you to understand that. I need someone to understand that. He didn't just break a lease, he tore up this fundamental, unspoken promise, this pact we forged in the quiet grief after mom and dad died. And for what? For some shiny, new, soulless corporate title in Seattle. Seattle? A city that rains 9 months out of the year, a place where he knows literally no one. As if this city, our city, the place that holds every memory we have left, wasn't good enough for him anymore. As if I wasn't good enough to be a reason to stay. He has the nerve to call it an opportunity. That's the word he used with this bright, almost manic look in his eyes. An opportunity? What about my opportunity? What about the canvases I have stacked in my room? Waiting for the inspiration that's so hard to find when you're constantly worried about keeping a home running. I'm the one who put my art on the back burner, who stayed in this ridiculously expensive city because he needed to be here for his career. I managed our home. I made it a sanctuary for him to come back to after his draining 12-hour days. I was his support system. I was the one making sure there was a life waiting for him when he wasn't being a corporate drone. I sacrificed my own dreams, my own potential, so that he could have his perfect, streamlined life. And this is the thanks I get. He walks out, leaving me in this hollowed-out shell of a home with a lease that has my name on it too, a fact he conveniently forgot to mention during his grand departure speech. And somehow, in his twisted narrative, I'm the one who's supposed to be understanding. I'm the one who's supposed to plaster on a fake smile and say, "Oh, Tristan, I'm so happy for you." Well, I'm not. I'm furious. He didn't just move out, he abandoned me. And he has the audacity to act like he's the one who's finally free. How dare he? How dare he make me the villain in the story of his great escape? For years, this was our system. It worked. After the funeral, when the world felt like it was made of sharp edges and sympathetic platitudes, Tristan was the one who made sense of it all. I was a mess, just completely shattered, and he looked at me in the middle of our parents' eerily quiet house and said, "You're coming to live with me, Amelia. We'll figure it out together." It wasn't a question, it was a statement. He was the older brother, the responsible one with a brand new, respectable finance job. I was the 22-year-old art school dropout with a portfolio of half-finished projects and a heart full of holes. Of course I went with him. It felt like the only safe harbor in the world, and for a while it was perfect. He handled everything. The rent on this beautiful, sun-drenched apartment that I could never have afforded on my own. He'd just wave his hand and say, "I've got it, you just focus on your art." The bills that would pile up on the kitchen counter, I'd see them one day and the next they'd be gone, paid. He had this silent way of taking care of things. The fridge was always stocked with the expensive organic milk I like, even though he never drank it. When I'd mention offhandedly that my favorite set of paintbrushes was getting worn out, a new set would appear on my desk a week later. I know what you're thinking. But it wasn't like I was some freeloader. My art was my work, and it doesn't come with a steady paycheck. It requires space, both mental and physical, and he provided that. He understood that. He was the pragmatist, I was the visionary. We were a team. He made the money, and I made the home. I was the one who knew how to arrange the furniture to catch the afternoon light, the one who cooked actual meals instead of the sad takeout he'd subsist on. I brought life into this apartment. He just paid for the electricity, that was our balance. He was good at his spreadsheets and his market analyses, and I was good at being his sister. At being the person who reminded him that there was more to life than quarterly reports. He needed me for that. So when I'd forget to transfer my share of the utilities, it wasn't because I was irresponsible. It was just part of the dynamic. He'd cover it because he could, and because he knew my contribution wasn't something you could measure in dollars. It was something much more valuable. He knew that, he had to have known that. That's what makes his leaving so utterly insane. He didn't just walk out on a roommate, he walked out on the entire foundation of our life together. The first crack in that foundation appeared about 3 months ago. He came home from work with that look on his face, a weird mix of terror and exhilaration that I hadn't seen since he got his acceptance letter to college. He was practically vibrating. He dropped his briefcase by the door, loosened his tie, and said, "Amelia, you are not going to believe this." My mind immediately went to the worst case scenario. Did you get fired? Is the company going under? I was already calculating how we'd survive on my occasional Etsy sales. He laughed, a loud, booming sound that seemed too big for our living room. No, better, much, much better. They offered me the director position for the Pacific Northwest branch in Seattle. I just stared at him, the words didn't compute. Director, Pacific Northwest. Seattle, they were just sounds, disconnected from our reality. Our reality was this apartment, this city, this life we had built. Seattle, I finally managed to say, and the word came out small and cold. As in Washington State, Seattle. The one and only, he beamed, completely oblivious to the ice forming in my veins. It's a huge step up. More responsibility, a corner office, a serious pay bump. It's everything I've been working for. Everything he'd been working for. He didn't say everything we'd been working for. The panic started then, a cold, clawing thing in my chest. This wasn't part of the plan. The plan was him succeeding here where I was. But what about us? I asked, my voice trembling a little. What about this apartment, our homes? His smile faltered for the first time. Well, that's the thing we need to figure out, but this is an amazing opportunity for me, Amelia. For you, I repeated, the words tasting like poison. And that's when I started to fight, not for him, not for his happiness, but for the preservation of my world. I started pulling out all the stops. What about me, Tristan? You expect me to just be uprooted, or are you just going to leave me here to fend for myself? I let a tear slip down my cheek. It wasn't entirely fake. You know I can't afford this place alone. You promised Mom and Dad you'd always look after me. Did you forget that? Is some fancy new title more important than that promise? I wasn't trying to be cruel. I was trying to remind him of his duty. I was trying to save us from a mistake he was too blinded by ambition to see. For the next few weeks, I thought I was winning. He'd get quiet whenever I brought up Mom and Dad, his shoulders slumping with that familiar weight of responsibility I knew so well how to place on them. He stopped talking about Seattle with that annoying, cheerful glow. I saw him looking at spreadsheets late at night, probably trying to figure out how to turn down the promotion without getting fired. I felt a grim sense of satisfaction. He was seeing reason, he was choosing us. Then one Saturday afternoon, he sat me down at the kitchen table. He had a folder with him filled with printouts. It felt like an ambush. Amelia, he began, his voice calm and steady in a way that set my teeth on edge. I've accepted the offer. I'm moving at the end of next month, but I've worked out a plan for you. A plan for me, as if I were a problem to be managed, a line item on his departure checklist. He slid a piece of paper across the table. It was a listing from Craigslist for a room in a shared apartment in a neighborhood I'd never even heard of. I've talked to the main tenant, her name is Brenda, she seems nice, he said, his voice full of forced helpfulness. The rent is manageable and it's near a bus line. I also found two other options, and I'll cover your first 2 months' rent and the security deposit to give you a cushion. I looked at the grainy photo of a depressing-looking bedroom with a single window facing a brick wall. Brenda, a cushion, the clinical, detached nature of it all made something snap inside me. This wasn't a discussion, it was a verdict. He had already decided my future, a future that didn't include him. My goal had been to make him stay, to win the argument, and he was just bypassing the argument entirely. I don't want your charity, Tristan, I said, my voice dangerously low. I don't want to live with some stranger named Brenda. I want my home, I want my brother. This is my home too, Amelia, and I have to leave it, he said, his patience clearly wearing thin. I can't build my entire life around this apartment. You're 27 years old, you need to be able to stand on your own 2 feet. That was it, that was the line, he wasn't just leaving. He was judging me, he was calling me a burden. The anger was so hot and sudden it felt like a physical blow. All the fear, all the panic, it all curdled into pure, unadulterated rage. Stand on my own 2 feet? I shrieked, standing up so fast my chair screeched against the floor. I have been holding this family together while you played executive. Who do you think you are? The tears were real now, hot and bitter. I reached for the most painful thing I could find in my arsenal, the one weapon I knew he was defenseless against. You're just like them, Mom and Dad, so wrapped up in your own lives, your own plans, you never stopped to think about who you were leaving behind. They left us, and now you're doing it too. You're a betrayer, Tristan, a coward. You are no different from every other person who has ever abandoned me. The color drained from his face. I had never, ever used them against him like that before. It was a low blow, and I knew it the second the words left my mouth. But in that moment, all I wanted was to hurt him as much as he was hurting me. I wanted to win. And as I watched the shock and devastation wash over his face, I thought for a horrible, sickening second that I had something broken him after that fight. It wasn't the dramatic, shouting kind of break. It was a quiet, terrifying snap. The anger in his eyes vanished, replaced by a calm, chilling emptiness. He didn't yell back. He didn't defend himself. He just looked at me, really looked at me as if seeing me for the first time. Then he nodded slowly. "You're right," he said, his voice flat and devoid of any emotion. "You're an adult, Amelia, you don't need me." And that was the beginning of the end. I thought it was a tactic, a new form of silent treatment. I expected him to crack in a day or two, to come to me with an apology, to finally admit that leaving was a mistake. But he never did. Instead, he began what I now understand was a campaign of malicious compliance. He agreed with me. He was leaving, and I was an adult who could handle it, so he let me. He started packing, not with the frantic energy of before, but with a methodical, detached precision. He'd spend his evenings wrapping his books in paper and taping up boxes, the screech of the tape gun a constant, grating reminder of the ticking clock. He stopped asking me if I'd eaten. He stopped leaving the remote on my side of the couch. He just stopped. I tried to play it cool, to show him I didn't need him either. But the world I had so carefully insulated myself from began to intrude. One morning, the Wi-Fi was out. I called out to him, annoyed. "Tristan, the internet's down again. Can you call the company?" He just looked up from a box labeled kitchenware and said, "The bill is in your name, Amelia. You'll have to call them." I stared at him, dumbfounded. When had that happened? He had switched it over months ago to help me build my credit, he'd said. I had completely forgotten. A week later, a cheerful email from our landlady, Mrs. Gable, popped up on my phone, reminding me that next month's rent was due on the 1st. The full amount? My stomach dropped. I walked into the living room where Tristan was dismantling his desk. "Mrs. Gable just emailed about the rent," I said, trying to sound casual. "Okay," he said, not even looking at me. "Okay, what do you mean, okay, what are we going to do?" He finally stopped and turned to me, his expression unreadable. "I'm not sure what you're going to do, Amelia. My last day here is the 28th. I've already paid my final portion." The panic was back, and it was suffocating. I didn't even know how to access the utility accounts. I didn't know the password for the gas company's website. These were the invisible threads he had woven to hold our life together, and he was now, one by one, snipping them, letting me fall. I'd try to ask for help, for a password, for a phone number, and he would just look at me with that same placid, empty gaze and say, "You can probably find it online." He wasn't fighting me anymore. He was letting me drown in the reality I had claimed I was ready for. The week after he left was a blur of cold pizza, late notices, and a growing, gnawing terror. The apartment felt huge and hostile without him. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like an accusation. I was completely and utterly adrift. My anger had burned itself out, leaving behind only the cold, hard ash of regret. I had won the battle, I'd driven him away, but in doing so, I had torched my entire world. In a moment of pure desperation, I called our cousin, Zoe. Zoe had always been my ally, the one who would roll her eyes with me about Tristan's workaholic tendencies. I needed someone to validate my pain, to tell me that he was the monster, not me. I launched into the whole story, painting myself as the tragic victim of his sudden, cruel abandonment. When I finally finished, the line was silent for a long, uncomfortable moment. I expected a rush of sympathy, of outrage on my behalf. Instead, what I got was Zoe's tired, heavy sigh. "Amelia," she said, and her voice was gentle, which was somehow worse than if she'd yelled. "I love you, you know that, but you have no idea what he's been going through." "What are you talking about?" I asked, a defensive edge creeping into my voice. "He's the one who got the big promotions." "Did you ever once ask him if he was happy?" she countered. "He called me about 6 months ago, Amelia. He was on the verge of a complete breakdown. He told me he felt like he was drowning. He said it felt less like he was living a life and more like he was just funding yours. He felt so guilty, so trapped by his promise to your parents. He said he loved you more than anything, but that he was disappearing. He was afraid that if he didn't make a change, there would be nothing left of him to love." The words hit me like a physical slap. Funding my life, trapped, disappearing. It was a version of our story I had never, ever allowed myself to consider. My carefully constructed narrative of the selfless artist and the supportive brother crumbled into dust. He wasn't a villain who had abandoned me, he was a prisoner who had escaped. The phone felt heavy in my hand. The confusion and regret were overwhelming, a toxic cocktail that burned in my throat. I had been so focused on my own fear of being left behind that I never saw I was the one holding the lock on his cage. I had to fix it. I had to make him understand that I finally saw. I hung up with Zoe, my mind racing. I wasn't going to let this be the end of our story. I drained what was left of my savings and bought a one-way ticket to Seattle. The entire flight, I rehearsed my apology. It was going to be a masterpiece of contrition. I would take full responsibility. I would tell him Zoe had told me everything. I would promise to change, to get a real job, to pay my own way. I would beg him to let me start over, not as his dependent, but as his sister. I pictured a tearful reunion, a hug that would mend all the broken pieces. I found his new apartment building online. It was sleek and modern, the kind of place that felt sterile and anonymous. I texted him from the coffee shop across the street, asking if we could talk. To my surprise, he agreed immediately. When he walked in, he looked different, lighter. The perpetual tension in his shoulders was gone. He was wearing a simple t-shirt and jeans, and he looked younger, more relaxed than I had seen him in years. He ordered a black coffee and sat down, his expression open and calm, but also distant. I launched into my speech. The words tumbled out, a messy, tear-soaked torrent of regret and promises. I told him I was sorry for being a burden, for using our parents against him, for being so blinded by my own selfishness that I couldn't see he was suffering. I told him I finally understood. He listened patiently without interrupting. He just watched me, his gaze steady. When I finally ran out of words, my voice hoarse, he took a slow sip of his coffee. "I forgive you, Amelia," he said, and the simple words should have been a relief, but they felt like a closing door. "I really do, but I can't let you back into my life. Not like before." "I don't want it to be like before," I pleaded, leaning forward. "I'll be different." He gave me a small, sad smile. "I know you mean that right now. But I need this. I need to be on my own. For the first time in my adult life, I'm just me, not a son, not a provider, just Tristan. I need to see who that person is. I can't do that with you here." He stood up, put a $10 bill on the table. "I hope you find your way, Amelia, I really do." And then he walked out. There was no anger, no lingering resentment, just a final, devastatingly calm refusal. That was 3 months ago. I'm staying on Zoe's couch now, trying to piece together some semblance of a life. Yesterday, she was scrolling through her phone and I saw a picture over her shoulder. It was Tristan, standing on top of a mountain, surrounded by a group of smiling strangers. He had his arms slung around a woman with a bright, genuine smile. But it was his face that broke me. He was laughing, a wide-open, unburdened laugh, squinting into a sun he had clearly been missing for a very long time. He looked completely, incandescently happy, and it was in that moment I finally understood. For him, this wasn't a tragedy, it wasn't a move, it was a jailbreak. And I was the prison he had finally, thankfully, left behind.